The old man stood outside the glass doors for almost 10 minutes before he finally reached for the handle. His hand trembled slightly, not because he was weak, but because at 72 years old he was about to do something he had never done before in his entire life. He was about to apply for his very first job. Hello, everyone. I'm really glad you're here today. Sometimes the quietest moments in life carry the heaviest stories, and the one I'm about to share with you is about courage, dignity, and the strange ways life asks us to begin again, even when we think all beginnings are behind us. His name was Walter Hayes. If you saw him walking down the street, you probably wouldn't notice anything unusual. Just another elderly man with silver hair, a neatly pressed shirt, and a pair of glasses that had been repaired more than once. But inside his coat pocket that morning was a folded piece of paper he had practiced writing on for 3 nights straight. It was his name, his phone number, and 3 simple words: looking for work. Walter had spent most of his life taking care of other people. He grew up in a small town where opportunities were rare, but responsibilities were not. When his father passed away unexpectedly, Walter was only 17. College stopped being an option. Instead, he stayed home to support his mother and younger sisters. He worked wherever someone needed help, fixing fences, delivering groceries, repairing broken chairs in the neighborhood. Nothing formal, no contracts, no uniforms, just quiet work done quietly. Years passed that way. Then he met Margaret. She worked at a small library and had the kind of laugh that made people turn their heads without knowing why. Margaret believed Walter was capable of much more than he believed about himself, but Walter always shrugged and said, "As long as we're fed and warm, that's enough." They built a simple life together: a small house, 2 children, a garden in the backyard that Margaret cared for like it was part of the family. Walter continued doing odd jobs around town, always reliable, always kind, but never officially employed anywhere. Somehow it always worked out, until it didn't. Margaret passed away 3 years ago. It was quiet, peaceful, but the silence she left behind filled every corner of the house. Walter still woke up some mornings thinking he heard her in the kitchen. Sometimes he even set out 2 cups before realizing. Their children lived in different cities now. They called often, but life moves fast when you're raising your own families. Walter always told them he was fine, and for a while, he believed that himself. But life has a way of slowly changing things. The savings he and Margaret had carefully built over decades began to thin. Repairs on the house, medical bills from Margaret's last year, the rising cost of things he had never thought much about before. Walter wasn't angry about it, just thoughtful. One evening he sat at the small wooden table where he and Margaret used to eat dinner together. In front of him was a newspaper with a small advertisement circled in blue ink: "Part-time store assistant needed." Walter stared at it for a long time. He had never written a resume, never attended a job interview, never filled out an application form. For 72 years, life had simply been about showing up and helping where he was needed. But this was different. This required asking. The next morning, he ironed his shirt carefully. It took longer than usual because his hands were slower these days. Then he folded that small piece of paper with his name and phone number and placed it in his pocket. And that's how he found himself standing outside those glass doors, gathering the courage to walk in. Inside the store, everything felt loud and fast. People moved quickly through the aisles. Music played softly overhead. Walter stepped aside near a display of canned soup, trying not to look lost. Finally, he approached the front counter where a young manager was scanning inventory on a tablet. "Excuse me," Walter said gently. The manager looked up. He couldn't have been older than 30. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" Walter cleared his throat slightly and unfolded the small piece of paper. "I saw the sign outside about the part-time position. I was wondering if you might still be looking." The manager blinked for a moment, not in a rude way, just surprised. "Of course," he said. "Do you have a resume?" Walter paused. "No," he said honestly. "I'm afraid I've never had one." There was an awkward silence that hung in the air for a few seconds. Walter felt the familiar feeling of embarrassment creeping up his neck. Maybe this had been a foolish idea. But then the manager asked something unexpected. "What kind of work have you done before?" Walter thought about that question. His life didn't fit neatly into job titles. "Well," he said slowly, "I've repaired fences, delivered groceries, fixed chairs and tables, looked after gardens, helped neighbors move houses, taken care of animals. And for 46 years, I made sure my wife always had fresh vegetables from the backyard." The manager's expression softened slightly. "And you've never had a formal job?" Walter shook his head. "No, sir, but I've always worked." Something about the way he said it felt different from a typical interview answer. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just true. The manager leaned back against the counter. "What made you decide to apply now?" Walter looked down at the paper in his hand for a moment before answering. "My wife used to say a person should stay useful for as long as they can. I suppose I'm trying to honor that." The store felt quieter somehow after that sentence. The manager glanced around at the busy aisles and then back at Walter. "Can you start tomorrow morning?" Walter looked up, surprised. "Yes. Yes, I believe I can." The job itself wasn't complicated. Restocking shelves, organizing products, greeting customers when they asked for help. But Walter approached it with a kind of care that people noticed almost immediately. He straightened every item perfectly. He walked elderly customers to the right aisle instead of just pointing. He carried bags to cars when someone looked tired. Within weeks, regular shoppers started recognizing him. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Thank you for helping me last week. Your tomatoes from the garden advice actually worked." Walter would smile in that quiet way of his. For the first time in his life, he had a name tag pinned to his shirt. The letters were small, but every morning he adjusted it carefully before starting his shift. One afternoon, a teenage employee asked him during break, "Mr. Hayes, why did you wait until 72 to get your first job?" Walter thought about the question for a moment. "I suppose," he said slowly, "life kept giving me different kinds of work before this. Taking care of family, helping people around me, loving my wife. Those things didn't come with paychecks, but they were still work." The teenager nodded thoughtfully. Walter added one more sentence, almost to himself. "And sometimes when life changes, it's okay to start something new." Months passed. Walter didn't become rich. He didn't suddenly transform his life into something dramatic, but something small and meaningful returned to his days. Purpose. Every morning he had somewhere to go, people to greet, shelves to straighten, and sometimes when the sun came through the store windows just right, he would imagine Margaret standing near the garden aisle, smiling that same quiet smile she always had, as if she already knew he would find his way forward. because the truth is, life doesn't stop asking us to grow just because we grow older. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk through a door they've never opened before, even at 72, maybe especially then. If this story touched you in some way, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to start something new later in life? Feel free to share your story in the comments. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories like this one, consider subscribing so we can keep sharing these moments together. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's never too late to begin again.